wrong, please feel free to ask and derail me. This will be part just kind of showing some of the cool stuff we're doing, part giving you links to go off to other places as I kind of explored these things. So my name is Brian Olendijk. I work at the eLearning Institute on a project called ELMS Learning Network. Basically, we build out all these different systems to meet needs that kind of go beyond what Canvas or a traditional LMS would let you do, whether that's for security reasons, privacy, whatever. So if you want to learn more about the project, these are things either inspired by the project or things you can find that happen to work in it. You can go to ELMSLN.org. This is just a really brief visual of what something like that would look like. And so it's not that we don't use an LMS, it's that maybe we flip an LMS, or that we have all these other services and tools kind of bringing our experience together. If you don't think this happens, well, if you're using Yammer or you're using VoiceThread or you're using Twitter in the context of a class, I would argue it's kind of already happening. You're sending students to different places, you're pulling stuff in via LTI or iframes, so we're just kind of visualizing it. But this talk is beyond just it's accessible. So an alternate title for beyond just it's accessible, if I can speak, is fun ideas around A11Y, which is short for accessibility. And so what we'll be looking at today is some links, cool JavaScript, more cool JavaScript, other types of cool JavaScript, probably additional JavaScript, increased usability as a result of these things, and kind of my process of how some of it you might say, why is that useful? And I'll kind of talk through why it's useful to do some of the stuff we're doing, how we can produce empathy. So again, going beyond just it's accessible, I don't want to talk about, in this instance, use an area landmark for we're talking, how can you use the browser to produce empathy towards people with disabilities, as one example. That's way more than just, are your headings in the right order? Because you can have 10 million headings on the page, and they could be in the right order. It is technically accessible, but it's not really usable. And so I'll do some demos along the way. So what are we talking about? I found this wonderful image. So this is a wheelchair ramp at a parking lot. Go, sweet, it meets the requirements of a wheelchair, it's a ramp, and overlook the fact that it's pretty much the exact size of a wheelchair. So it's kind of fitting the letter of the law, but it's not really usable. It's an incline, there's no like handrail or anything, and there's turns throughout it. So, as opposed to a straight ramp or any other method, this is kind of what we're getting at is, hey, you can make something accessible, but it might not really be user-friendly. Some cool links I found as I was going through some of this is the WC3, or W3C rather, has a draft spec for low vision needs. And so this is, I believe, as of March, it's a working draft from earlier this year, but they lay out all the information you really want to know about low vision as just one type of impairment, some recommendations of things you can do. And so as I was going through this, I was really taken by these images of what an example of central field loss is. I haven't implemented it yet, but I did find some stuff that you click a button and it'll simulate these conditions. And they do it over top of images much like that to say, this is what it would look like. But I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this in real time? And so I started looking around at some other types of things, which led me to stumble onto this project. It's A11yproject.com. It's a community-driven effort to make web accessibility easier. They kind of got some nice checklists, some resources to check out. But it's a lot of where if you've ever seen the hashtag A11Y on Twitter, it's kind of where it comes from. So, basic stuff to more advanced stuff like using captioning services with HTML5 videos. So just a good resource. As I was digging even further down this, I think it was one of their articles, I found this, which is opendyslexic.org. It's a font Funface that's been developed specifically for people that have dyslexia. And this is I immediately said, okay, well, we could apply this font everywhere, or you could tell people how to do it. But from a design perspective, this isn't super appealing looking, admittedly, but it is much easier to read as a typeface if you have dyslexia. So they did user testing to come up with what would help reduce the effects of dyslexia. Another thing, as dyslexia is kind of interest to me, I'm not going to say I have dyslexia, but I have a really hard time reading things on the computer or in books. I always have. And so if anyone's seen me work, I don't know if you will see this, but I actually zoom in on stuff and bounce around a lot, which kind of led me to find this thing. I saw an article about it one day. It's called Spritz, and SpritzInc.com is the original thing for it. It's an app that you can get on your phone in different places that basically does this. And see if I can zoom in so that we all can play along with what it's supposed to do. The idea is you're basically, instead of you bringing your eyes to words, you're bringing the words to your eyes. So if all of you, there's 20 or so people in here now, if you just want to stare at the screen where it says click to Spritz, right at this little line, and you can start to read what the text is. I'm going to do it at a much lower value to start. Right, so that's kind of the idea, is the words are coming to you, and then your brain, if you do it at a high enough speed, you can actually overcome your inner voice, because we all kind of are limited based on our ability to process the words, because we're kind of saying them out loud in our head a lot of times. But so, some people can train their brain that you start to jack this up to, 500. And you can see it gets a little overwhelming. So need to kind of train your brain to be able to do it. I've also seen reading strategies that use this in addition to going through and reading. And so if you would actually read it quote unquote, at a much higher rate than you can actually process, and that it's kind of priming your brain for when you experience these much larger words or like nouns and things that you might come up with. And then you iterate over it another 3 or 4 times, slowing it down each time. And then that whole process to read a very long article might only take, 2 minutes, but that then when you go to read the article, you've kind of jogged your memory about what you're about to experience. So it's kind of a neat approach. So I've taken these 4 things and mashed them together into a Drupal project called A11Y. It does some other stuff that's not in those first 4 things, but you can just read it quickly. It has a thing called Speed Reader, which does a Spritz-like effect, and we've also got some support for dyslexia thing. We've also got a simulation, because I mentioned a desire to generate empathy. So I'm going to go to a link now and kind of start to show some of those. In context, 10. I think that's the one I wanted. Good, I'll get this recording of a Bing background there. There we go. All right, so in the context of ELMSLN, we've got this little settings panel, which we're still working on a bit, but this implements the accessibility settings block. And so we've taken some of the recommendations from the W3C as far as contrast, ability to invert colors, and disabling interface animations. So as you noticed, I jog this in so I could click high contrast mode. And instead of, if you've seen image processing stuff that generates this, instead of doing that in a pre-processed way, it's actually doing it on the fly in the browser. So if I would watch a video right now, it would actually be showing me with this filter. HTML5 and CSS3 have some pretty powerful transformations that allow you to do this type of stuff. But now it's just globally applying. Doing that, I could see, hey, this image is completely washed out. And so this is kind of what I've been doing with some of these, is applying these different effects and then actually going through and trying to experience the content as someone that would have need of whatever that is. And so I had it in my slides, but I was actually able to resolve a few accessibility issues as far as things disappearing as a result. You may have noticed that invert colors, text went away. That's actually a retrace error in Chrome, because it is a really intense thing to be processing the screen like that. But we can also do color inverting, so it's kind of turn out the lights. I can see that, hey, I have some work to do. There's no border around this to indicate that this is higher up in the hierarchy now. We'll move that away, and we can see we've altered our fonts and things so that it's more, kind of like turning out the lights, if you will, useful for some types of visual deficiencies associated with like the cones and rods in your eye. We can also, you can combine these, then you get ridiculous processing of each, right? So it's dark and we've jacked up the contrast. It then saves these settings so you can kind of keep the interface this way if you're an end user. There's also disabling interface animations. If you have, you might get vertigo or, kind of motion sickness, actually. I don't know if any of you get motion sick when you see like Parallax. But Parallax, which is like scrolling down the screen and lots of stuff is moving, actually kind of makes me sick. I had to stop using like iPad apps and things that would do that. But so when you disable interface animations, it basically just kills a couple jQuery types of things and tells it, hey, don't process any animation, just show the end result. There's also, because I mentioned simulator, I'll show simulator last, but got speed reader in here. And so if I open speed reader, this is kind of a version of Spritz you mentioned before. And it's not nearly as scientific as the actual Spritz plugin. Spritz plugin has research around it. You have to pay for it. This is a JavaScript simulation I found that basically takes whatever the text of the page is and then tries to go about 33% into each word and presents one word at a time. That's not exactly what Spritz is doing, but it's pretty close. And it gets the job done for now. I mean, it could obviously have improvements done to it. You can also see a progression of how far you are through it, or increase the speed as you go until you overcome your inner voice and just go, oh my God, what am I looking at? The last one, which I found from another site, was it was a blog post. You started out reading it and it said, my friend was trying to tell me about how she had dyslexia and it was hard for her to read words. And then as you keep reading the blog post, they were actually manipulating the letters in real time. And so it was fascinating to me. And it's not exactly dyslexia, but I mean, it's kind of hard to simulate dyslexia, quite frankly. But so I'm going to turn it on. You can see it gets pretty crazy. So it randomly shifts the position of letters in the word and then keeps them there. And so, especially if you scale up the interface, you can see that, you kind of get these flashes when letters flip, which is, at least for me personally, similar to what I experience as to why I end up zooming in on text. Is a lot of people are trying to isolate the amount of information in the words that they're experiencing just because they have this visual distortion. So I'm going to disable that, and then we'll turn on the optimizing fonts for dyslexia, because I said I didn't want to mess with the design that we had out of the box. I don't want everyone to have the Open Dyslexic font. And so instead of that, I have a checkbox, which optimize fonts for dyslexia. So we turn that on, it forcibly overrides what the fonts are in use to use the opendyslexic.org font. And so now you can see it's kind of altering the shape of letters in this font, especially like your U's have a wider or thicker at the bottom and things, and thinner at some parts. And it's supposed to help, if you have dyslexia, it's help your eyes to be able to process the different words more effectively. So it's an interesting series of fun links and kind of my implementation of them. There's also some basics that I forgot to mention. There's text scaling, which I just did through the interface, but you could also do by clicking up and basically scale up the interface, reduce it back down. That's nothing earth-shattering. So I'm going to turn off these settings. they will hold after the fact. So if I set, you know, for example, if I had, I really need to invert colors, and then I go to the next page, you'll see a flash. I'm still trying to overcome the flash, but it'll pick up and keep applying that setting as you go across courses in our system and things. The next little tech demo in here I want to show is, so heading order and constantly running wave reports and things is kind of boring, to be quite frankly. It's not to say you shouldn't do it, but it's not the most exciting thing in the world. So I noticed something in this library called Materialize CSS, which is a style framework similar to like Bootstrap, which Canvas uses, but this one's inspired by Google. And they had this thing called Scroll Spy, which would notice as you passed by an element on the page as a heading, it would notice it and kind of highlight that that's what you were seeing. What I thought was interesting with it is it also illustrated, based on the heading tags, kind of the visual hierarchy. And so it automatically generates this visual hierarchy, which now our pages just do in ELMS if there's space for them. So you could see it on the previous page. Whatever that one was, is what it's doing, and this is Scroll Spy over here. If you're interested in material in general, if you do any development or design work anywhere else, it's very well documented, very easy to use, lots of neat little things. Obviously, I won't go to the Parallax ones. I said that makes me sick. But if I go to Scroll Spy, you can see it's basically the thing in their documentation off to the right. So it gives you in-page navigation, which you can then jump between items. So what we're doing with it is we're reading off H1s, H2s, 3s, and 4s. Any more than like 4, and it gets a little ridiculous, quite frankly. There's not a reason to do it. And so we're taking that hierarchy and then visualizing that hierarchy off on our right side. Now this is responsive, so that question doesn't come up. If there's not enough room, it goes away because you don't have enough real estate for it. But what we could do with this, I literally implemented it this morning, so we haven't had time to really go through it much, is you can see that vocabulary, image gallery, and then I would expect that these items are actually intended to be underneath here. And so this is visualizing my page hierarchy. So if I'm visualizing my page hierarchy, maybe this isn't the actual hierarchy, or maybe it is. In this case, it is. But if it wasn't, I would have a visual signifier that is jarring and annoying to me as the designer and developer to suggest, hey, you have an H2 here, and then this is an H4 and an H3. And so visually, that'll look goofy over here, but also as far as the hierarchy, these things won't be indented correctly because it's just reading off which tag comes in which order. It's also kind of nice as you go down, you see it kind of highlights and draws your attention to the thing in question. It also, as you scroll back up, it points to that to suggest that that's what's on the screen at that time. So it's a nice more usability side of things, but if you're using it, to populate it and make it look right, you're going to have to use accessible nesting of items in a hierarchy in order to do that. So I like to try and incentivize good design and good accessibility practices in that way. Similarly, we'll pull media in from other places, such as this image is pulled into the scope of the page, but it's not actually from here. So we'll upload our media somewhere else and then use a token to generate it. And it's not just to do it, it's because then we're controlling what the output is, which means people don't have to have nice Katrina. Thank you for getting that thrown onto my screen. I can't disable Twitter notifications, sorry. But because we're controlling this style and telling it as opposed to copying and pasting HTML, we can ensure that all of the images everywhere just are accessible. You have to have an alt text data in order to use it, and then it renders in an accessible way. If there was an accessibility issue, we would be able to do it pervasively, to stamp it out pervasively as well. So the next thing in here, so I covered screen or speed reader, is something called Jordi. And Jordi is, oh, I actually have it open. Cool. Jordi is just a really simple JavaScript library that allows you to do keyboard shortcuts. And keyboard shortcuts and key presses are just kind of obnoxious in JavaScript if you've ever had to do them for anything. But what it lets you do is bind, define keys really easily. Obviously, there's the Konami code. Why wouldn't someone have that in a case like this? But so that you can do things whenever you notice the user has pressed certain keys in succession, or that they've pushed, they're holding down control and they hit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or what have you. And so the way we're able to do that to make a simpler interface, and I still need a good way of visualizing the shortcuts, is if I do Alt and Shift on the keyboard, it then shows what the keyboard shortcuts are for everything in there. The point of this is to attempt to get away from a mouse, a pointer to type device input. If you may have noticed before when I was on this, which I won't go there with the mouse, just to illustrate. So if I do Option Shift, I could hit A, which will bring up my accessibility menu. I can hold it down again and see that if I hit Escape, that'll go away. I could scroll down and see there are additional keyboard commands, right? So if I did double tap down, it's supposed to do a jog scroll to the bottom. If I do double tap one direction or the other, I can actually go to the next page. So if I do double tap arrow backwards, I'm going between pages now. If I scroll down, it's angry at me with my scrolling now. It's registering my double taps from before. If I scroll down and I hit Option Shift, you can see that I could do Option Shift and then forward or backward to more easily go between content without scrolling all the way. So we're really trying to link, usability and some of these. So this isn't directly accessibility. There's nothing saying you have to not have a mouse or an input device, a pointer-based input device. But when you do it, and when you start to, I'll show the voice-based one next, is it starts to make you question kind of the labels of things, the usability patterns. When you eliminate a method of input that you have access to, it really changes the dynamic of how you have to think about doing things. So let's say I didn't have a mouse for whatever reason. Maybe there isn't that input device. Maybe that device is broken. If I did Option Shift, you can see that I can still get to everywhere. And we actually have shortcuts layered into all the different tools in the network. But so I could then jump around user menus and open up the More menu, do a lot of stuff just with the keyboard. I'm not actually touching the mouse anymore. Show my share icons. The next thing it does is if I'm only using the keyboard to do it, then as you can see, and I have an accessibility issue here that I have to take care of, is my cursor scope of what's in focus in the DOM is actually behind this forward active element. And so then I use these type of techniques to find issues and then put them in the queue. Yes, I can also do this with just additional testing and wave or compliance sheriff, but kind of prefer this method personally. The other neat thing about how those get there, and this is intended to be like a programming type of a thing by any means, just wanted to illustrate, is that in order to get it so that when I do my key combination and hit S as the target, there's a special HTML attribute on anything called data-Jordi-key, and then whatever is the value there will, in this case, it shows the letter S because it's reading off of that. And then basically I just do it so that now if I hit Y, it's going to go to the syllabus because it's effectively just clicking whatever the item is. So it's simplified integration, which is not specific to this. You can do that with anything. The next one of these little weird things is Anyang. And Anyang is speech recognition, but it's entirely browser-based. So it allows you to easily add voice commands to effectively anything on the web. This isn't specific to Drupal by any means. We just have some half-decent integration with Drupal for the purposes of the demo. But so I'm going to go to the demo just to get an idea. First thing you'll notice is that I've got a recording icon on up here. And so I'm going to refresh the page, and then I'm going to say what it does on the screen. Hello. Show me cute kittens. Show me Penn State. So I didn't actually test that one. I probably shouldn't do that live, but it's really easy to add these. It's just using stuff that's built into newer browsers. Chrome has this activated by default. It's actually, I think, 54 or 57% of global browser statistics suggest that this is just on by default. Firefox will be getting this support in the near future by default. You can go and change a setting in Firefox to turn it on, but we're looking for things that just happen to work automatically. So the way that it did that, it was pulling images from Flickr, but has this cool syntax where you say, like, show me, and then whatever your input is, or calculate. And so you can also do set things up to be more conversational. So you could do say hello to my little friend, or this would also match with say hello friend for building kind of a voice-based interface. And quite frankly, why I care about voice-based interfaces, I don't know. Kate probably questions that all the time. But it's actually led to a lot of usability improvements, much like the pushing 2 keys and getting this kind of pop-up as to, hey, what can I type now? It's led to usability improvements as far as like the labels of things, as far as being in situations where if you're only using your voice to navigate, you get stuck. And so it's not just that you get stuck, it's that you've been able to create a usability issue that you happen to notice as a result of using your voice to try and navigate that. So for example, it may seem silly, but in much earlier builds of this, we didn't have an X or anything to suggest how you close this. So when I'm doing things without my voice, as you see, it just recognized my voice. I gave away my secret. With a voice prompt, I can then visualize a voice prompt, much like we did with the text thing. So I'm going to refresh this page, and I'm going to play with some of those. Hello, Jarvis. Jarvis won't respond. Hey, Jarvis. Open share menu. Scroll. All right, so I can see, again, situationally, I have a usability issue illustrated by my voice in which I've been able to scroll down the page, and I've said those steps. You should put your hands up so we know when you're not scrolling. Yeah, I'm not scrolling. My hands are up here. Sorry. Yeah. Nice, Katrina. So I've kind of generated a usability issue in which that modal frame isn't jogging with you when you're in the context of the modal frame. So now, situationally, the focus is above the current screen and the available options. But, again, I created a usability issue. So it's kind of finding design patterns like that as a result of this. So I'm going to close. Oh, wait, I got to hold my hands up here. Open more menu. So that's a variant. You see menu is in the parentheses, so it would also respond with open network, close, help, open user, close, hey Jarvis. And so I don't know if that audio is coming through. But the other side of this is instead of just you talking to the browser can actually talk and read things back to you. The advantages of this are that you don't have to have voiceover, or rely on operating system differences between spoken voice and things. If you can just write them right into the browser. So you don't need Dragon, I think it's Dragon speech recognition or whatever. You don't need any of that. It's just the future of applications, this stuff will just be built directly into it. The other thing, and this is specific to the Drupal implementation. For the purposes of this demo, I actually just have enabled a setting that's listening at all times. That's not really practical. If you can, if you imagine you're sitting at your desk and you just said close, and then suddenly it recognizes the word close and closes the menu. So there's a key combination, which if you push those keys, you would then see the available options, right? And then it would be listening and pick it up and trigger it. This is available to our instructional designers, but I haven't really told them, even though all of them are in here right now. So I guess now they know, but I don't tell them the key combination because I want to make sure we get all the bugs worked out with it. But it's kind of neat, the different design patterns you see from it. It's also, at some point in the near future, there are already internet-connected TVs. I don't know if any of you tried to take courses on like an Xbox One with a Connect interface, but eventually the Connect will be able to read off of this type of input as well. And so then I could legitimately, be just shouting out commands at my TV, which is, not traditional accessibility by any means. But if any of you have ever had a, 6-month-old, and you still want to be a productive member of society, you have to learn how to not have access to your arms while accomplishing other things, which leads to funny photos of propping up a bottle with one hand and attempting to use a cell phone with the other or whatever. But even little situations like that, if you could just use your voice to speak to interfaces, I turn off my TV all the time with an Xbox One because I'm doing other stuff. So it's improving access to it. It's beyond just blind people, quite frankly. It's lots of different conditions that we can help account for and help build empathy and improve usability as a result. The last demo I'm going to do here, I got to grab my link, is combination of two different kind of projects I've been working on. One is this thing called Hacks, which I'll illustrate what that is in a minute. And the other is the voice-based stuff. And so if we marry the voice-based stuff with a design interface, we could actually start to have the user say what they want to see and have it build HTML dynamically. And so the goal with Hacks, which is short for Headless Authoring System, is that we would have a static HTML area. And then if you're talking to it or what, I don't care how you're using it, quite frankly, but that you would use that interface in order to build out HTML pages that you could then basically hit save or copy and paste or what have you, drag and drop them around after the fact. The most important aspect of what the goal of it is that it's not tied to any system. So, if you've ever used Website Tonight software, think of that, except that you don't have to use whatever vendor is what the goal is. So I'm going to refresh it. The reason I keep refreshing browsers is I don't think it's in my inspector, but no. Okay. When you do continuous listening, it is actually processing literally every word I'm saying right now. And so it gets kind of clogged up. So I have to disable it. Insert row. Insert subheading. Insert heading. Insert heading. Insert paragraph. Insert video. Insert image. Insert template. And again, I don't know if the audio came through, but that's where the robot voice is asking me which template I would like, which is where we leave off with that, because I haven't gotten to actually having it then make the selection. But the idea with Hacks and then mashing up the voice-based commands with it is it's very hard to build out HTML without knowing HTML, and then it's still pretty hard to build out HTML even with CK editor and WYSIWYG type of stuff. So if we could just say what we wanted, and it brings the design components, the images, and things to us, it really reduces the barrier entry for all people to generate HTML. The other idea with Hacks is that you select this heading, which is actually an H2 or a paragraph, and then I could then drag and drop that around. so that we create these containers that we can then place HTML in, which is reordering behind the scenes. I don't need to show, the HTML, but it is actually generating, in this case, an H2 tag, an H3 tag, a P tag with this sample text in it. And then to go from there would be that I would have a spoken command of like edit or move down or whatever those commands are, and that I could actually start to organize the page just with my voice. If you think about having a really big TV or a projector, how much better this would be at doing kind of interface prototyping stuff than a whiteboard that you're scribbling and crossing out and stuff. Again, the other idea being that this is just static HTML and JavaScript. So, I could run this on my local computer as just like an HTML prototyping generation thing. And then after I'm done, I copy and paste that into whatever I feel like. That could be, Canvas, that could be my own document somewhere else. So again, trying to illustrate that trying to take accessibility and access and improving access to things way beyond, just, hey, did you use area landmarks? Not that those aren't important, but, the next step after just making it work is making it great. So thanks for hanging in. Does anybody have any questions?